One Question is designed to give subscribers valuable insights on how executive leaders in college athletics think about key issues on their respective campuses, in their departments, or within their leagues and conferences.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown and welcome to One Question, where we highlight executive leaders in college athletics. Our guest today is Jennifer Williams. Jennifer is currently the Interim Director of Athletics at Alabama State University. Greetings, Jennifer. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Ty.
I am glad you're on. Now, your background, Jennifer, you've been the Interim Director of Athletics there at Alabama State for almost a year. Prior to, you were Director of Development and the Executive Director of the Aggie Athletic Foundation over at North Carolina A&T. Your former Assistant Director of Development at DePaul University. So you have a wealth of experience in fundraising and development. And thinking about your current position, Interim Director of Athletics, where I assume that development is a big part of that too. And a lot of your experience has been at historically Black colleges and universities. Can you share with us your approach to fundraising and how it applies to fundraising at HBCUs, which I've been told is not an easy thing to do, but it seems like you're pretty successful at it. Can you give us some insight?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I kind of go by just the kind of a top four that kind of guide me in my approach to fundraising. And the first is relationships matter. And so I really try to focus on building relationships with key stakeholders, being that alumni, season ticket holders, parents, former student athletes. And that's my approach when I go into an HBCU, is really trying to be that champion who builds those relationships. I call it friend raising because, people give to people. And so that's my number one, is just building those relationships. Number two, being transparent. I believe that there's been a lack of trust at HBCUs when it comes to money and how money's being used and spent and allocated. So being as transparent as possible. In the past and even in my current role, we do a lot of town hall meetings. We meet with our donors to, let them have their chance to ask questions, to see what the financials look like, to talk about key projects that are coming up, various campaigns. So that transparency, to me, that helps with creating those positive relationships, because in our culture, you really have to build that trust. People aren't going to give money to people that they don't trust or who they feel aren't going to be in the best interest of the university. The third one is just having a genuine interest and passion for what you're doing. I didn't graduate from Alabama State, did not graduate from North Carolina A&T. I actually attended their rival institution, North Carolina Central, for grad school, and did not graduate from DePaul. And what people will tell you is that they knew that I loved each of those institutions and that I was genuinely invested in making sure we were successful. And people can pick up on false or phoniness. If they see that you're genuinely involved and interested and there aren't any ulterior motives, people will give. Another thing was, what people kind of say about me, or what my focus was when I was on strictly just focus on external relations, was really enhancing opportunities for student athletes through fundraising and relationship building. That was my kind of mantra, was that's, every day, that's my goal. I want to enhance opportunities for student athletes through fundraising and relationship building. So that kind of guided me through my years when just focused on fundraising. And then listening. You have to listen to what the donor is passionate about. A lot of times donors or prospects get frustrated with development folks because you're trying to steer them in a way to give instead of sitting back and really listening to what their affinity is. It makes no sense for me to talk to a person who's passionate about, let's say, soccer, and try to force them to give to the football team. You really have to be in tune with who you're cultivating and what their affinity is. And then kind of matching, different initiatives and campaigns to that prospect. So that goes back to your listening to what their interests are. So that's kind of my top four.
What are some of the similarities and the differences between development at an HBCU or development at predominantly white institutions?
I'm going to start with the similarities first.
Okay.
What I would say is some of our similarities that the professionals there who are tasked with generating revenue, they're all passionate about supporting student athletes or students depending on what side of the house you're on. And then I think that both HBCUs and predominantly white institutions, you both have different types of giving. You can focus on transactional giving versus philanthropic giving. So when I was at North Carolina A&T, our mode of getting folks to give was more transactional. It was through season tickets, a point system, a priority period. The more you gave, it pretty much gave you better perks in terms of points. So it was driven more transactional giving. Well, now at DePaul and at Alabama State, it's more philanthropic based. We don't have a point system here. There aren't any pretty much priorities. We're asking people to give because they love the institution. Not that you don't love the institution at A&T, but it's just build more on a point-based system, which gives you better incentives the more you give. Now, here at Alabama State, we do have giving levels, but I still hear from some of our donors is that we shouldn't be getting anything. We should just give to give. And that's just the culture at your various institutions, whether you're at a PWI or an HBCU.
Right. And of course, those methods work for whoever are using them at the time, whether it be based on points, so they figure out how to use them the best. In terms of your progress to becoming the interim director of athletics at Alabama State, or even your stops prior to, has there been anything that you specifically have implemented that helped you see success in your stops doing fundraising and development?
I'm going to say at every institution. So I'm going to start at DePaul University in Chicago. That's a basketball D1 school. Basketball is your revenue generating sport. So really kind of instituting these caravans where we took our basketball coaches on the road. That was huge. Getting your coaches out in the public. Another thing that we implemented there was communicating. My boss, he came from a sports information background, so he was really big on telling the story. And that was something that was pretty much ingrained with me and that I've carried over to my present role is how do you tell a story, whether it's through print, media, video, but that was something we really focused on when I was at DePaul. We did weekly communications to our former student athletes, to our donors, keeping them in the loop of what's going on because a lot of times you hear that once I graduate somewhere, we lose touch. So that was the biggest thing there that was implemented. When I got to A&T, we had to implement the priority point system. So I came into a culture that was more philanthropic and had to change and educate people on the new transactional model of giving. And anytime with change, there's pushback. But we saw when I left there, the growth that we had at A&T was phenomenal. You had people with affinity and the capacity. And anytime you have those two, tremendous things can happen in terms of giving. And so once the model was implemented, talk to our board about how we go about with transitioning people from giving at the end of the fiscal year, which was June 30th when I was at A&T, to giving on a calendar year. And so getting people in the mindset and then getting your donations in at a certain time so that you would be ranked to participate in the priority and keep your current seats from the previous year. So I was really proud of being able to implement that model and seeing our numbers grow up in donors. I think when I left A&T, when I started, we had about 200 and maybe 50 people giving to the Aggie Athletic Foundation. And when I left, we had over 720 donors giving. And we were bringing in $1 million annually in private donations from donor, not corporate money, just, from donor revenue.
Right, which is impressive.
Yes. And then here at Alabama State, it was really just implementing some structure. People give. They have been giving for a while here. It was just really putting in a structured program and really branding the giving platform, which is the Hornet Club.
Well, I have one final question here relative to the purpose statement you said earlier, and forgive me if I get it wrong, but it was something to the effect of enhancing the student athlete experience through fundraising and relationships. Now that you're in the chair, whether it's interim or not, the director of athletics chair there at Alabama State, how have you taken that and expanded it for the overall program beyond fundraising?
That's a great question, Ty. I think anything, and what I convey to my staff, that anything we do, you have to think of the student athlete first. If you live by that model in any aspect of athletic administration, you're going to be successful. So I tell my coaches and my staff to let that guide them, doing what's in the best interest of the student athlete, because without them, we wouldn't have jobs. And so, we're here to make sure they have a great experience. And whether it's from coming into the compliance office, from the fundraising standpoint, from sports medicine, how we interact with them in our, strength and conditioning, to our coaches. Because a lot of things I hear from former student athletes is that, I had a horrible time in college. And I'm not saying you have to coddle the student athlete. The student athletes want to feel as if they're treated fair and that they are having a well-rounded experience. And that's what we try to provide here at Alabama State.
Excellent. Well, Jennifer, this has been an excellent conversation. I think there are a few things you pointed out that people can learn from who either want to work in development or currently do work in development, on how it works specifically at HBCUs, but also on a broader scale. Really appreciate you joining us here on One Question.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Ty. It's been an honor.
That was Jennifer Williams. She's currently the Interim Director of Athletics at Alabama State University, and she has a wealth of experience in development. And she was also chosen as the 2018 FCS Administrator of the Year by the Women Leaders in College Sports. And of course, this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of One Question is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.